Hey, good afternoon. It's Thursday, July 7th. And thanks so much for being here today. And welcome to my channel, Everyday Talk 24/7. Yesterday was one of those days where I wasn't able to do a video, so that's why I say Lord willing at the end of the videos, because sometimes God has other things. And yesterday was one of those kind of rare days where you didn't get a video. But we're back at it today. And on Tuesday, we asked the question, what is truth? Well, today I'm going to ask another question, right, consistent with that. What is sin? And this is huge for us because we tend to look at sin as failing to obey God's commands, failing to keep certain requirements. And certainly it is that, but it's much greater than that, as we're going to look at it in a moment and try and get, I hope, a clearer perspective for you. So essentially, sin is going to be three things, and I'll go back over them in a moment. But we sin when we turn from God's good commands. That's kind of the obvious one. But we also sin when we choose to live for what pleases us rather than what brings honor to God. And then thirdly, when we choose not to live in a relationship of faith and love to God. See, it's those three things combined. Obedience is a part of it, but it's only a part of the core. We turn from God's good commands. We choose to live for ourselves and what pleases us rather than God. And then we choose not to enter into a relationship with God. There are several places, but two places, key places, where God chooses to give a summary of what it means to honor Him is all about. First one we'll look at is in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verses 12 and 13. And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God ask or require of you, but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to Him, to love Him, to serve the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul, and to observe the Lord's commands and decrees that I'm giving you today for your own good. See, there's all those components of relationship, care, putting God first, all of that. And then when Jesus, in a similar way, is challenged in Matthew's gospel, tell us the two greatest commandments, trying to give an order to these things as if obedience were the key, keeping them down the line. Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets, in other words, the sum total of the scripture, hang on these two commandments. So you see, we've got to talk about more than just keeping a list of commands, a list of do's and don'ts. So let's go back over those three components again in a little more detail. We sin when we turn from God's good commands. Sin is more than following commands. So we can't reduce obedience simply to obeying commands. When we do this, when we make sin only about not obeying God's commandments, this is what leads to legalism. This is what leads to self-righteousness. This is what leads to a judgmental spirit. We're actually kind of like this idea where we can hold people accountable. Well, you did this, you didn't do this. So we invent our own rules. These vast flood of legalistic ideas. They have nothing to do with the relationship, but only bullet point accountability. That's not what God is after. That's not after your heart. So it's much more than simply not following God's commands, but it is very much a key component when we choose not to follow the good things that He's done for us. Secondly, we choose to live for what pleases us rather than what honors God. That means something else other than God has first place in your life. When we fail to follow that direction, then this is what leads to a life of slavery, abuse, both in terms of relationships, substance abuse, whatever you want to plug in there, people-pleasing, living in the fear of people rather than the honor of God. Because something else other than God is first. I'm making a choice to do what is pleasing to me rather than is pleasing to God. And then the third component here is what kind of wraps up these first two together. When we choose, sin is when we choose to reject a relationship of faith and love to God. We fail to see that life is about relationship, about bringing honor to God. So sin is not valuing our relationship with God as our most treasured possession. When we fail to honor God in that way, this is what leads to us trying to find fulfillment in things that can't satisfy. Even good things, like trying to find fulfillment in being a parent or being in marriage, in friendships and relationships, things into the career or arts or whatever activities that are really exciting to you. Sometimes sports falls into that gap. All these things, while possibly good in themselves, if God's not at the core of it, if we're not seeking to deepen our relationship with Him in everything that we do, this keeps us from God, and this is ultimately a sin. This is what keeps us from humility and builds pride, because now I'm deciding for myself what is best, what honors me. And this is when we bring down those dark roads of bitterness and disappointment, because I tried to find completion in something. It's about a relationship that's not connected to God, but connected to something else. As I said, then this keeps us from humility, where God is first. So yes, it's much more than just not keeping a command. We sin when we don't keep those commands. But when we live for what pleases me rather than pleases God, and when I choose to reject the relationship of walking with God in faith and love. When I go that route, I walk into this dark world of serving self, of serving something other than God. And that's where the quicksand pulls us in and gets darker and darker. That's why we must reject sin and love God for all it's worth. And we'll talk about tomorrow, and maybe Saturday, because we've got Q&A Friday tomorrow. Please send in your questions. We've got some good ones already. But tomorrow or Saturday, we'll flesh out more of what obedience looks like in relationship to what sin really is. Again, love your comments and feedback. Check us out everydaytalk247.com. If you haven't subscribed, turn on post notifications. The videos will come right to you. Again, thanks so much for being here today, and Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye-bye.